Well, morning all. This is our next in our series of kind of ClearlySo webinars on impact investing. Today, we're going to discuss how safety tech can protect society and also generate returns for investors. And I'm glad to say I'm joined by three very esteemed panelists: Zoe Peden from Ananda, Douglas Lloyd from Azoomee, and Sean Gardner from Glue. I'll let them introduce themselves in a few minutes. I'm Chris Parsons. I'm the host for this webinar. I lead the enterprise team at ClearlySo, and I'm the lead in the education and training sector. If you don't know us, we are Europe's largest impact investment bank. We work with high impact and scalable organisations on raising capital, anywhere from £300,000 right up to over £20 million. We also work with impact fund managers on structuring and raising impact funds. And please do check out our website for past events we've done and keep an eye out for our LinkedIn and Twitter updates. But overall, thank you for joining this webinar and let's get started. Shall I start with Zoe? Do you want to introduce yourself and also to Ananda?
Yep, hi, I'm Zoe. I'm the investment manager for the UK at Ananda Impact Ventures. We're a pan-European fund, sector agnostic, but one of my favourite areas at the moment is safety tech, so I'm getting my head really into it at the moment. We're a late seed Series A investor, initial ticket size normally 1 to 3 million. And yeah, I'm very happy to be on this panel. Thank you. Thanks for the invite.
Thank you, Zoe. Douglas, do you want to introduce yourself and to Azoomee also?
Good morning. Thank you so much, Chris. My name's Douglas and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Azoomee. Azoomee is a fun learning platform for kids. Includes two brands, Azoomee, which is a younger brand, which covers 4 to 7, and Da Vinci, which covers 8 to 12. We're all about positive screen time. At the beginning, we teach kids how to explore safely within a completely curated environment. By the time they're 8 to 12, they certainly should know what they're doing, or we certainly hope they do. And we just give them fantastic positive content, which makes them explore and learn in the way children should.
Thank you, Douglas. And Sean, last but not least, do you want to introduce yourself and also to Glue?
Yeah, sure, Chris. Thanks for the invite today. So I'm Sean Gardner. I'm the founder and managing director of Glue. We're an EdTech business. We take best practice from in schools, work with an EdTech pioneering school, Charlton's a collegiate academy, to incubate and scale up that product and then partner with international brands such as Britannica, Pearson, Microsoft and the like to scale those solutions within the school system, both in the UK and internationally. And 2 hours ago, we launched the UK's first online school. So we just announced that with Nesta. So that's an MVP at present, which will scale up over the next 2 to 3 months into a national infrastructure. So that is very pertinent to today's discussion, clearly. So thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Sean. So just to set the scene, I think, what is safety tech? In my view, it's one of those subjects that clearly is very topical right now, but where our home lives and our work lives really blur. The way I see it, it's all about solutions that really are trying to address online safety and content for society to make it all safer for all of us, especially in this around trying to protect children online against harmful content, but also radicalization in terms of kind of terrorism fears also. So very important for government, but also for companies and individuals at home. So it covers everything. You may have seen recently a report issued by the government, which is a very good primer, I think, for learning about safety tech, and I encourage you to read that. But it describes the sector in the UK as at least kind of worth £500 million and growing fast. So I think it's a very good topic to explore in terms of how it can generate impact for people and protection for children online, but also returns for investors. We see various solutions around kind of protecting or identifying and removing harmful content online, but also protecting users against accessing that information and creating safe places and safe platforms for investors. And I think our speakers today can cover many of those topics. So just to get the ball rolling and to think about kind of the impact today, how much do we think COVID-19 has actually, and the lockdown around it, has amplified this concern and this worry for people? Zoe, do you want to give your perspective first on what you've seen talking to companies?
I mean, I feel like I'm in the midst of it. It's like it's going crazy at the moment. I mean, you've got Facebook, Google, and other sites have sent human moderators home during this period, and so the exposure of children to harmful content online is skyrocketing. These moderators that Facebook have got are facing such sensitive information, and normally they'd be in secure facilities, and they're at home viewing this, so they're not able to do their job properly. it's just the level of those images that they're being exposed to and circulating unchecked now because the moderators can't do their job properly. It's absolutely awful. So I think it's really what's been happening during this period has really moved everything into a crescendo and exacerbated everything enormously. So I think now more than ever, this is why I'm so interested in investing in this area. It's at a peak. I'm sure Sean and Douglas, they know this. So.
I mean, Douglas, given what Azoomee does, as you outlined, I'd imagine you echo those themes. But what have you seen in terms of kind of the raise in concern and the activity caused by kind of lockdown?
I think the first thing is that, in the spirit of candor, which I suppose makes panels, better. When we launched Azoomee, we were surprised by, I'm going to say, the overall laziness in parents in terms of recognizing the online threat. Parents don't do it deliberately. There's no way I am a parent of 3 young girls, but parents simply don't understand the online threat and leave it too late. And we've spent 5 years, amongst many other companies, we're one of many in the UK, campaigning for the fact that this is all too little too late. And if you don't change behavior when kids are young, then of course they have a problem. And we have so many people who say, oh my God, my kids got into trouble age 10, 11, 12. And I can't say Azoomee is the only solution, but it's clear that if you don't teach kids early. So where am I getting to here? I think what COVID-19 has done is it has also ratted out the parents who say completely disingenuously, I don't give my phones or my tablets to my kids. It's a fundamental lie. The fact is that every parent gives their kids phones or tablets because they're just there and the kids see them, and therefore the idea that there are these mythical parents who don't use that. So what COVID's done is it's almost made online, digital activities acceptable. That's what it's done. It's made it mainstream and acceptable because with homeschooling, it's not a question of choice. You can't sit there and say, I'm not giving my kids a tablet. And as a result, what that has meant is because it's no longer a choice, parents have started to genuinely confront the issue because they can't hide it. What's happened to us? I mean, we've had activity on our platform. It's increased something like 500% during this period. And at times more than that. Our audience has grown from 47 million to 62 million in 2 months.
And Sean, from your kind of engagement with schools and also, as you say, the EdTech solutions you're seeing coming through, I mean, how much are you seeing the recent kind of couple of months amplifying this concern and actually also solutions to try and address it?
Yeah, so, I mean, school doesn't stop at the school gates anymore, does it? I think that's the bit that parents are, historically just sort of rolled up, pushed them out the car at 9 o'clock, let them at 3:30. Something happened in the middle of the children never tell you about. And, now all of that's being surfaced at home. And, I think what we're seeing generally is that there's just been such a woeful lack of investment by government in infrastructure. And that's leaving our children and parents exposed unnecessarily to threats that they don't properly understand. I completely take Douglas's point. It's difficult when schools are leading on products and platforms that are less than secure. I mean, I saw research recently that showed that schools are adopting 51 different platforms. And of those 51, I would think only 3 or 4 of those are properly secure. And that's the challenge is, it's people are rushing to solutions because products is being thrown at schools for free without really assessing the viability of that solution within a home environment and the safety and security that sits around it. So unusually for schools, safeguarding is coming down the list more than it should. And that's the concern we're seeing at this point in time.
And I guess building on that, and back to you, Douglas, I mean, in terms of, as parents realizing how much they need to kind of catch up on and learn to kind of make sure their children are safer online, how much are you really kind of seeing that activity happen in practice, and you're seeing kind of a better behavior and understanding come from parents?
Well, I'd just like to follow quickly, first of all, on the point that Sean made, which I completely agree with, which is that I think the government are underinvesting, but more importantly, they're not investing in the right place. And what they're doing is they're worried about box ticking as opposed to solutions. We have this fundamental problem, so you can get your e-safety badge, which makes everyone feel kind of overtly safe, but it's nothing. It's a bit like passing a first aid certificate and saying you could save someone's life. The whole thing is airbrushing the issue. So the focus on a little grade or a little sort of piece of paper, as opposed to here's a practical solution that takes you into home. That's the problem. And the second problem, because I think is that the government doesn't have the guts to realize that the best companies in the world, and Zoe's very lucky because they're on her doorstep, the best UK safety companies in the world are being built in the UK. They're all here, whether it's Sean, whether it's us, whether it's Hopster, whether it's, I can list about 20 of them, but the government somehow seems to be incapable of recognizing that on their doorstep are the world leaders, but they're avoiding them. It's good to see that Graham France is on there because he might actually take note of this. But, I have spent just so much time in Portcullis House having that discussion about that. And there seems to be a reluctance to engage with brilliant companies across the UK, which could be perhaps not unicorns, but, multiple £100 million companies. In terms of more specifically your comment, Chris, this is the other thing, is that everyone always wants impact. And again, this comes back to box ticking. It's one of the things that we had, big discussion with Nesta on, that I disagree. Impact is not always about box ticking, because behavior sometimes takes years to change. If we can impact a number of kids so that when they share messages on Facebook, on WhatsApp, on Snapchat in a different way, that impact will happen in 5 years' time. But most investors and government don't recognize that to make that societal change doesn't happen in 3 months, and they want the impossible. So you chase metrics because everyone feels good, and then that means that they invest or they make a government decision. But it's one of the fundamental things that people don't understand.
Just on that point, Douglas, perhaps to you, Zoe, just picking up on the point about impact, and I guess the time lag, as it were, to really kind of show true change in behaviour and impact. How do you approach that from an investor point of view?
You'll know, Chris, you can apply this across many other industries. Look at a theory of change. You're looking at those outputs that over time lead to outcomes. It's just how you want to go about mapping. I think, Douglas, maybe Nesta might start to change its mind soon with everything there's like an onslaught of you now. You're really all getting together as a group of these 70 plus companies, and I'm doing this panel to highlight the fact that this is an area that everybody who's an impact investor or mainstream should be looking at now, because it's grown to the size. And I think it's coming up to its peak, which is where the investors like to come in just before, it starts really going up as an industry. I think the attitudes need to change is the simple answer.
In terms of government actions, and Douglas, your points are very helpful. How much do you think things like kind of the online, the white paper that's still kind of in process in government, the various frameworks being proposed, will make a difference? Sean, do you want to pick up on that point first?
Sure. Well, being blunt, I don't think they understand what's happening on the ground. That's the trouble. I think there's a lot of theory, which is fine, but schools are struggling, parents are struggling. Douglas's point about investment being in the wrong place is entirely what we're seeing. There's some well-meaning initiatives that just aren't properly thought through, and unfortunately those initiatives create more problems. A great example, there's 400,000 laptops being shipped to our most disadvantaged children, and there's no e-safety training. It's locked down with Umbrella, which is fine, but the kids are getting a unit that they've got no training and no learning connected to it, and it's headline grabbing stuff, but it isn't actually solving the problem on the ground. And I think the movement that needs to happen now is, collaboration between all the key stakeholders in the sector, rather than it just being always top down, so that these issues are understood before programs are put into place that are then unpicked by people that are already under extreme pressure. So I'm afraid, in my mind, everything that's going on at the moment is just increasing risk and not reducing it, and that's the tragedy here.
And like everything else, there's a mixture of, I guess, carrot and stick. And I guess the stick being suggested is more regulation, the new regulator for the sector. And I think that's a key part of the online white harms paper. How much do you think that will make a difference, Sean, in terms of actually having, especially it's more for the social media and kind of companies of content online, how much that will make a difference?
Well, it all helps, isn't it? But I do think there's still too much of a disconnection between what happens in the day-to-day lives of our young people and the way in which their parents are able to support them, and policies that are pushed in from government. We're great believers, and I would say this, wouldn't I, that sometimes system change has to come from within, not always be led top down. And I think there's still too much in my mind that's top down. White papers are fine, but from what I've seen of them so far, there's not enough grounded input into those particular policy decisions. I think Douglas, is seeing some of that already from what he said.
Yeah, I mean, if I can follow on from what Sean said, I mean, I give you an analogy. When we built Azoomee, we took what could probably be described as an entrepreneurial approach to what government is doing and saying, we'll lock kids in a box, right? Azoomee actually was a walled garden, that old-fashioned term, in that once you were in, you couldn't get out. And as soon as we launched it, the number one thing we did was get rid of that, because as anyone on this call who has children, if you force a child somewhere, what do? They try and leave it. It's a bit like if you tell kids that they can't smoke, what do? They smoke. And so, or drink, etc. And therefore, what we said was, what we need to do is to create an environment that is both safe, so the parents feel comfortable and they have certainty. But on the flip side, the kids are going to have fun and it's going to be a place for them. Investors don't understand that at all. I haven't found one yet that understands. Weirdly, individuals understand it because they get the problem, but investors don't, because they always say, yeah, but you can get out. But then they forget the real life experience of what life is like. If you put a kid in a room, they're irritated. And that's why, the other point I would make is, I wrote an op-ed for the Telegraph a while ago, and I said, if the government invested in advertising in this sector in the same way they did with drink driving, look at the impact it would have. I wrote an article, it was very long, about the impact of putting just something like, on average, £3 million a year into saying it's just morally wrong to drink drive. And it was a brilliant piece of work by the government, truly brilliant. And it changed lives and it changed behavior. The government needs to do is to stop wasting time on white papers, which is navel gazing, and actually invest in something that changes people's behavior. Because if you're driving and you see something and you actually realize it's going to affect your kids, in the same way that we're dealing with obesity, we deal with the way kids deal with online, we'll get somewhere, and we'll get somewhere fast. But until they sort of spend the whole time in procedures, we'll go anywhere.
Thank you. If we move away from government for a second and just, I guess, look more to industry. So, the large scale social media platforms, clearly very topical, even before COVID, and a lot of pressure for kind of screening content. Again, how much do you see them changing their behavior and trying to adopt solutions that really can better screen content? And what more do they need to do? Zoe, do you want to share any thoughts you have there first?
Well, I was reading the other day, there's something called Project Protect, where the big tech companies have got together. I was just reading about it, which just means I don't really understand whether it's going to work. Maybe the fact that they've given a name to this new project where they're actually going to do something, they've spread it out to the newspapers, means they will do something. I don't know, but everybody's been pressurizing them to act, from the industry downwards, coming up from government as well. I don't know whether they'll make any changes, but at least let's just see what this Project Protect does. Douglas, Sean, what do you think of this? Is it tiring? Do you believe it?
Sean, do you want to share some thoughts first?
Well, I think, I said earlier that there needs to be more collaboration, and I think the fact that industry is coming together is a good thing, but as ever, it's got to involve all stakeholders in the value chain, really, and it doesn't do that, does it? Again, we're just getting a slice, and until somebody takes it top down right the way through and listens to each layer of the value chain and there's input that's joined up, you can't knock it because it's a good thing, but it needs to be better, I guess, is my perspective.
So just putting you on a spot slightly, Sean, if to build on that, what needs to happen? What do you think, what should happen next to try and achieve what do you think needs to be achieved?
If you look at where we are with COVID now, I think there's a wide acceptance that online is becoming more and more a part of day-to-day life at home, and for our children, it's going to become part of their landscape increasingly for learning and for social engagement and for other things, because we're less mobile now and we're less able to go to school and do tasks. So in simple terms, I think there's just got to be a bit more dialogue in understanding what problem we're trying to fix, because a lot of this is based on 16 weeks ago, and I don't know how you guys feel, but it feels a very different world to me at the moment. And I think that whole catch-up piece needs to be accelerated. I think there needs to be a voice from parents and children as to what they want to see from the social media companies, rather than the social media companies all getting together and telling them what it's going to look like. And that's still, for me, the disconnect.
And Doug, I expect a few views from yourself. I mean, you work in very large global organizations.
Never. I would suggest that in America, they regard, obviously, defense is one of the key verticals, right? It's a huge, huge expense. And recognizing the difficulty for innovative defense companies to break into what is, a multiple billion-dollar, can't remember the name of the program, but it's something like an SME program, which means that big defense contractors like Lockheed Martin or Raytheon are forced legally to work with partners who candidly are more nimble and have better technology and really understand what's going on to win contracts. It's a legal requirement. They won't win. And what I think that the government should be doing is, if, let's say, they accept that there are both technology solutions and then you need to influence behavior, and then you sort of allocate some money to it, I think that what they should be doing is almost forcing that kind of behavior, putting something in place which says, as Sean says, slither of the action. I think of our revenues, and it's peanuts when I think what should be on the table. I mean, it's just, we should have revenues which are sort of 100 times what we have right now. And even then that would be dwarfed. But if the government was to say, okay, Facebook, okay, Google, you've got to work with our leaders here. And we're all credible. Sean's business, our business, Zoe mentioned 70 businesses. It could be even more than that, but really amazing businesses covering every touch point. You would then support, reinvest in Britain is great, whatever that ghastly phrase is the government came up with. But you would be able to support these amazing businesses and achieve an outcome which would be great for the UK and actually probably come up with a better solution. I would model it on that.
We spoke a lot about, I guess, about the sector, about the impact, about government. The other half of the equation for this discussion is kind of the financial side, the investor appetite, the ability of these companies for great solutions to generate returns. So you mentioned you're still looking at the sector and learning more about it. There are lots of very exciting companies, as Douglas says. From your point of view as an investor, what do you look for, and what do you think many companies you're looking at need to show you from impact as well as commercial side to be appealing as an investment?
On a macro front, what I was interested in was the fact that this was an emerging sector with some leaders, like the two on here today, leagues ahead of many of the rest, but a large number of companies of those 70 plus that are at the seed stage, so they're much earlier on, and you can see it growing and just before the peak. So from a macro look into a new industry, this is an exciting time for us to get involved as investors, because we're late seed, Series A, want to get there before everything flies off. So there's enough of them with this 70 plus for us to take a look at a sector as a whole. And then for what we're looking for, because we're new, we're not cyber security specialists or anything like that. So our particular angle as late seed and Series A, so somebody who's got some revenues, then is at the point where they've got some technology, maybe it's the first step in their technology and people are buying it, and we come in to that point where they could start to sell more to one area of industry, maybe later on they sell to other industries. We're open to the fact, unusually, because we tend to stick when we invest in the UK to just say we want your sales to be within the UK. I know this industry isn't like this, you go international really quick, so we're able to extend our risk appetite to understand that. So we know that some of your customers, because the UK government hasn't encouraged enough people to take this industry seriously enough yet, that your customers are not all UK. You've had to go elsewhere first. So we're open to that too. But yeah, I'm at the beginning of my journey in all this. So I'm looking forward to spending the next few months speaking to lots of companies in the safety tech industry and building my knowledge up. I'm very, very excited, and I think other investors should be too.
And just drill into that slightly, Zoe, I mean, what specific themes or I guess attractions, but also concerns are you sort of forming your view around when you're looking at companies which are in the safe tech space?
You've got to have a vision. Some people are, when they come to us because they're seed and we want to track them over the next year, 18 months as they progress, that they're going to be starting with a very small, maybe niche area of tech with some IP in one particular industry, understanding that product vision, looking at the capability of that team, how fully formed is that team, to be able to execute on that one small area and understanding its application beyond that one small area. Because that's what I'm seeing when I'm looking at a lot of the safety tech ones very early on. I think you've got to believe in that vision. And we'll also be looking to go with other investors that have invested in this particular IP before to decrease our risk from that perspective. Plus, it's great for the entrepreneur to have, 2 or 3 investors on board, plenty of firepower in the money area. So, yeah.
And Douglas, you mentioned earlier that institutional investors you've found in the past don't kind of understand the impact or don't compare to individuals. I mean, if you were talking to institutional investors today, how would you present your story in a way you think would appeal to them?
I mean, I think first of all, I think this is a really difficult sector to invest in, actually. So it's not that I don't believe in it, but it's a really difficult sector to invest in. And Zoe says she's at the beginning of her journey, and I don't know how long Zoe's been working specifically on this particular vertical. But it's difficult because it comes back to the analogy that both Sean and I have kind of said about we're all anchovies and everyone else there are whales, right? And if we can't become maybe a large salmon, we're finished. But to get to that is really, really, I'm not sure why I'm on fish anyway. But the point is that it's really, really significant. And today, I mean, Zoe's very kind. I'm not going to load Sean into this, but we're still an anchovy. And yet we're a huge anchovy versus all the other people Zoe's doing. But we are minnows, to use another fish example. So I think what I believe impact investors need to believe in, and this comes back to the concept about behavioral change, is that society is going to accept that online safety, digital wellness, positive screen time, all of which form Venn diagrams, all intersecting with each other. That is a cultural, societal change that is going in one direction. And if you believe that, then you're going to have to bet on a few management teams, but you're not going to get comfortable on the numbers, which I know is something that investors hate. And as you know, Chris, I used to be an investor many years ago, belying my age. So that's the difficult thing. You're going to have to go with the gut that this is the right sector, the right place. And no Excel modeling will get you there. No, and we're growing very quickly, but nowhere near as quickly as I think we should be. And I think that's the hard thing. I think impact investors believe in this space. It's clear Zoe believes in this space, and she's not the only one. But it's quite difficult going to investment committee candidly and saying, we're going to go with this business, so this valuation, they're going to do this, because there is an element of just faith. We're still actually at a very early stage in this sector, and there are going to be a lot of wipeouts. I mean, we've seen a whole bunch of companies who are our competitors. And I said to you when we were speaking yesterday, Chris, the first 5 years, we're into year 6, are just about surviving. And, that in itself isn't achieved.
And Sean, from your side, I mean, I know you cover wider edtech solutions beyond this space in terms of, I guess, your historic discussions with investors. How have they viewed this scene? What challenges and attractions have you heard from their discussions?
If I'm honest, it's a bit frustrating, the process at the moment. I think what I'm seeing on the ground is that you need to be really agile and move really quickly. And actually, the one thing I am seeing post-COVID is that people are willing to make investment decisions and business decisions much more quickly. I mean, we're all more available. I've not had to wait more than a day for a meeting when, well, usually it's been a month, right? But the investment models aren't following the speed at which we're now working. So a great example, we're in a scale-up program with Nesta where we can go naught to national in 24 weeks. I can't go to an institutional investor to have a discussion around supporting that because their process takes longer than the 24 weeks I've got. It's just pointless. And that's what's got to change, Chris. We've got to be a bit more fleet of foot, a bit more believing. Picking up on Douglas's point, you're going to have to take a few bets, and 1 or 2 of them will pay off, and they'll pay off handsomely. And I think that attitude, in my mind, is just going to change a little bit now. We're just in a different place at the moment. That's certainly how it feels. Particularly
in a sector which is, speaking as I'm half American, as some of you may know, I think that's where American investors win, because viscerally, they'll take a bet and they'll say, Sean's the guy who's going to deliver it. He's going to have some bumps, and next year could be horrible. But this guy, he's going to deliver it. His business is going to win. And you know what? I'm going to back Sean, and I'm not going to put him through 6 months of, we're going to have to, and we're going to wing some things because we've got another X number of investments and some won't work. And as you know, Chris, I have personally raised, I think the number 13 million pounds without institutions to date, 13, which is, I think we're probably the biggest funded company in the UK through raising money through private individuals, or if not, we're very close to it. I mean, there are very few. So we don't have a single institution. It's not because we don't want them, but we would have gone bankrupt if we waited to make that decision. We're here because we didn't take institutional money.
So I imagine your ears could be burning slightly hearing all this. I mean, just on that point, more generally, I guess from Ananda's point of view and what you're seeing other investors doing, are you seeing a change in behaviour yourselves in terms of how you look at new deals, given we are all online, all remote now in terms of your processes? Are they changing and adapting?
I mean, we already did a lot of remote anyway. The rest of the team is in Munich. So we did a lot of online. And one thing that has changed, we used to fly people over and now we just do all the pitches are done remotely. So I think that's better for everybody. But I was just thinking about what you were saying, Douglas, because I've known Azoomee for quite a number of years now. And I know we were not in the right place when you came to us. And what I'm saying is to everybody, to all the other investors out there, is now's the right time. Not saying that it wasn't before the Azoomee, but the industry itself, there's enough out there for you to get a feel across the entire landscape and start to, as your first investment in this field, start to feel what you're comfortable with, because every single fund will have different risk appetite and things that they're happy with. And whether it's revenue or not, that's always going to be a sensitive one, Douglas, as you know. And
yeah, absolutely.
For the instance, the first one that we do in this field, I'm going to have to make sure I make the right decision because that's going to impact every single other decision that's made. So the very first thing that we do in this area is really, really crucial. So I do have to tread carefully. I know I do. For the rest, for the future. But no, determined to do it. Sometimes you just have to stick your neck on the line and go out there. And that's what I'm convincing Ananda to do.
Thank you, Zoe. I think on that good note, I think we'll probably like to draw kind of, I guess, the more structured sessions webinar to a close and really open up for Q&A. I see one question coming already, or two questions actually. So on the first one, I think from Christian, on this point, do we believe in pricing an investment premium for impact? I think it means, do you place a premium when you're assessing opportunities on the impact? Zoe, is that a question you want to try and pick up first?
On the impact, whether something's more impactful than other ones, are you saying?
And the company's worth more, I believe, as a result.
Oh gosh, every single thing that we invest in has an impact. As to whether that adds value, it's entwined with its business model. So the more that it sells, the more impact that they have. So it's one and the same. So I'd say yes, but the premium is entwined with the financial return. Hard to separate out the two is the way that Ananda looks at it. One and the same.
And a second question from Christian. On Douglas's point, how would you characterize or classify the type of investment you receive as compared to the investment we're talking about now? What are the pros and cons?
It's the question of what are the pros and cons of taking investment now versus pre-COVID? Is that how I understand it correctly?
I think so. Yes, he's saying yes.
Okay. All right. Okay. I mean, my view is, which comes to the first point that I made is that whilst I would have liked investors to have understood this environment earlier, I'm talking institutions because the individuals got it years ago. It is what it is, as the saying goes. I think that COVID has woken up the investment community to the fact that society is going to change and none of us, for example, schooling is going to be different, work environment is going to be different, and digital is a fact of life. It's not a choice. And therefore, I think that companies that can be deemed to be benefiting from that, and despite this awful situation, and hopefully we're one of those, in terms of helping parents, should find it easier, in my view, in principle, to raise institutional funding. I think the question before about whether you have a premium on impact, I think safety tech or this broad thing or ed tech is in itself kind of impact. And then Therefore, I don't think that there's any sort of, premium over premium, so to speak. I think ultimately it's then about, your market opportunity. But yeah, I would say we're all in a pretty attractive sector right now. But I still think that most of the investment in Europe will come from family offices and not from institutions, for reasons like Zoe's made, that they've got to make their first investment right, which I get because I used to manage an investment fund, and I completely sympathize with Zoe's position, even if I seem to be institutional investment bashing. I get it, but it's not very valuable for the entrepreneur.
And Sean, I see you nodding. Do you want to kind of add to that thoughts from Douglas?
I mean, I think that the whole piece around, where to find investment that's quicker is absolutely family offices and high net worth individuals. It's where we're orientating. It's a sad fact of life that for the speed we need to move, it's quite hard to see how some of the larger institutions with the current models can stay alongside us. I think they'll just become a drag, and that's not what we need at this point in time. And I think also what we are seeing as well is that there's probably more addressable niches that are coming through. So, and again, it tends to be about mass scale with institutions, and they're looking for the big picture piece, when actually, again, being agile on the ground, we're supporting 400,000 kids with an immediate need, and there's an opportunity there to make a decent return, but that just isn't interesting because it's not the whole education sector for some people, and that's kind of the corollary we're seeing at the moment.
Thank you. Another one from Ian. So a long question. So child safety is a hugely important part of online safety and one of the heart of his own work. Do investors see the impact in the wider sector, addressing bullying, misinformation, radicalization, sextortion, which can apply to people of any age, and especially to other vulnerable groups? Or is the focus more on children and protecting children? Is that where invest interest lies? Zoe, can I start with you again on that one?
Yeah, so Ian, he knows the answer to this one from me because he's spoken to me. But no, it goes well beyond. I mean, child safety, yes. I mean, the experts that you've got in the room today, that's where their focus is. But I'm looking across the board at all areas of vulnerability. So yeah, the stuff that science forensics does with Ian, looking at digital forensics, absolutely fascinating. And Ian actually started me on this journey. He showed me that online harms white paper, and that's what kicked me off. So I have Ian to thank, and hopefully he's stimulating lots of other investors' interest into this field across all areas of vulnerability. But yes, it goes much wider, my interests, than children, although children really, really important. So yeah.
I guess to Sean and Douglas, although these are the wider aspects are less directly relevant to your businesses, I mean, how important do you think addressing those are as part of the wider picture?
Sean, do you mind if I go first? I mean, for me, obviously we're targeting kids, but I think a lot of adults could benefit from watching Search It Up, our online digital series, as much as their own children, possibly more, because they're actually interacting more. So we hope that we will affect a wider group of behavior, because the kids, which is often the case, will actually tell their parents what they're getting wrong. So, they'll say, well, that's personal information, or you shouldn't do this. So I think that obviously whilst our target market is kids, there should be a ripple effect, and we would hope so. So yeah, I mean, it could go to older siblings, and it could go to parents. So yeah, there should be a virtuous circle from all of these technologies.
Sean, any thoughts you want to add to that?
Doug, as ever's made the right points, but I think the lens that we see a little bit is picking up on Ian's points around those verticals. There are clearly areas of amplification needed around bullying and radicalisation. I mean, the Trojan School piece is a great example. That wasn't about issues that affected young people, though ultimately it did. It was about, societal problems that needed addressing at a macro level. And I think that this is where I go back to the point about not creating silos, right, and having engaged communities at all levels, so that is right the way through the value chain, not just within individual groups that these things are being discussed. And I think, again, that picks up on the points I made earlier.
Another question for Christian. So on the flip side of premium, do impact investments need to factor in returns risk compared to traditional investments? I think the question is, does impact pose more risk compared to traditional investment? I might say one thing there. I think this is kind of to the heart of what ClearlySo does also. We believe there's a strong correlation between impact and financial returns, and actually it shouldn't be seen as a negative. Stronger businesses are often addressing key issues in society, which make them stronger as a result. To Douglas, do you want to share any thoughts on how you think to his question around impact investments posing a higher, perhaps, degree of risk compared to traditional investments?
I don't think that they provide an additional risk. What I would say is that defining impact is really hard, and that is where the problem is. I think that's hard from the institutional investor point of view, because if they're an impact investor, they need to try and show some way of defining that they are investing in something that makes a difference. And so I think the risk is more operational. That, I remember, and when we've spoken to certain impact investors, it's almost felt like they wanted us to stop selling our product and focused on impact reports and metrics and all of that, rather than, because until they could see that in a report that they could show to someone, we couldn't get on and consider actually building the business. So I think the risk to the business is operational, where impact drives the business rather than the business actually creating impact.
Just like to say, we don't make people do that. I do all the impact mapping. I think you've got to believe, well, this is how Ananda approaches it anyway, and I do, that we often look at businesses and they'd never consider themselves an impact investment, but the outcomes that they have do make them, they're impactful. So they don't have their impact metrics, so we will map them for them. So they were doing it without thinking about it, and they were having this impact. So we do all the legwork and make sure the KPIs we put into our agreement with them are something that they would measure as a business performance anyway. So yeah, no extra legwork required. It's all part of how you run a business. I think all businesses should be like this.
To one question which I wanted to ask you, and I know we're nearing the end of the call, so perhaps it might be a good one to end the call on. You've all spoken about how there are some very amazing, innovative companies in the UK tackling the safety tech space. Quite a few at an early stage. Do you think the UK really can become the market leader in this space? Especially given your comments, Douglas, about kind of the US and how perhaps more quickly investors can move there. Do we believe the UK really can leverage all that expertise and become the market leader globally in safety tech? Sean, your thoughts first.
I'm going to be a bit contentious and say no. I mean, we should, but we'll be shackled because the investment community won't move at the speed we need to move. And I'm sorry to say that in the audience in which we're sat, but that's the brutal reality of what we're facing at the moment.
Zoe, your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm here to stimulate the investment community. This is what it's all about, isn't it? Doing this panel. I think these companies need a rallying call from investors to come round. We need to syndicate, and we need to put our money where our mouth is and invest in some of these companies. So do get in touch with Ananda if you want to invest in this space.
And Douglas, your thoughts? I'm sure you have a few good points here.
I fear that I have to agree with Sean. I mean, I feel that change analogies, although I'm not really a football fan, we're in front of an open goal and there are 70 attackers and there's one goalie, but all 70 are going to miss. And they're all going to miss mainly because no one thinks big enough. And I think that and obviously I'm thinking about our business, but we could have been a unicorn. I'm convinced of it, or close to it, but we will never get anywhere near that. Now we'll do very well. I'm confident of that, but we won't be a unicorn. And the reason why we won't is that the route to money is too short. And you spend, I would say, Sean's got to be the same. I spend 80% of my time on fundraising. And until that changes, until people say, look, I've got a 30 million pound fund and I'm going to dedicate 10 million. And guess what? I'm going to be punchy with this. And that's what we do, and stop following the crowd. But until that happens, the UK, this will be one of those great missed opportunities. And the failing is both government and institutional investment. And I don't see that changing at all. You need to raise, for us to get to where we need to, I don't know Sean's business, but Sean probably needs £5 million right now. He could get on and he'd build a business. We need 50. I'm never going to get 50. I might get 20, but 20 doesn't do it. Why are we not in the US right now? Because we can't get the weight of capital. Why? Because we've just got to go through Excel models. And I always say, and this is the thing, and I know, this is hugely contentious, but when you get into an Excel discussion with an investor, you're not going to get the investment, because it's the Excel that matters and not the business.
Thank you. We've got time for one last question from Rachel. So RegTech is captured under safety tech, and the solutions that RegTech companies offer address safety, private security, consumer rights issues across all age groups, which will have a very significant impact. How comfortable will impact investors be with startups to address a whole raft of issues. Zoe, do you want to start with that one?
Oh, Rachel, trust elevate. Yeah, nice complicated question, Rachel. I think addressing a number of issues, I can draw parallels across other industries where I've seen this too. So I don't think that's a particular problem. I mean, you've got a piece of tech there that's applicable across a number of industries, solving a number of issues. So as long as that investor understands that's the way that your business works, and you're able to capture, the kind of impact that you're having in each of those areas, then it's no problem at all. No, I think it's exciting what you're working on, Rachel.
Yeah, I think from what we've seen in various companies, it's and what investors look for. It's clearly companies going to focus on points they can address and show a clear plan to deal with it. I mean, too much perhaps is too much of a stretch, but as long as a clear plan and they are clear what solutions they're trying to offer to tackle those points, I think it's very addressable. I'd like to draw the webinar to an end. So first of all, thank you to our speakers who offer some very open, perhaps controversial, but very kind of clear views on our questions. And thank you all, everyone, for attending this webinar. We're also hosting more events over the next kind of few weeks. Please do in touch if you want to hear more about those. I think otherwise, on that note, thank you to everyone for joining the webinar. Thank you to our speakers, and I wish you all a very good day.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.